it's not that hard to grasp. I think that they are trying to put us in a position where, because they know they can't compete, and they're talking out their butts, trying to make it look like there's like something sinister going on with the church.
Hello and welcome to the Aptive Podcast Studio. This is the Loyal Cougars podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds, joined today by legendary BYU former cornerback Brian Logan. Now I'm working with BYU TV as an analyst. What all do you do for them? I know you do countdown to kickoff stuff. What else do you do?
I occasionally fill in for. Well, actually, I don't do Sports Nation anymore. I'll do AFR, our Tuesday shows, or X's and O's shows when somebody needs me. But I don't do much anymore, man. I most people don't know that I took this break for like 3 years. I was just like fell off the planet, and nobody could get in touch with me. And I was doing all kinds of things. But now when I came back, they were like, you just kind of stay on this side and stay over here a little bit. We'll give you a little bit of responsibilities. So don't do too much now, but yes, countdown and our post game show mostly.
Well, and I think you add a perspective that not a lot of people do. They have like David Nixon, they've got McCann, they've got Blaine Fowler, but your perspective I think is a lot different, just because your experience at BYU is different. And so anyway, I enjoy the insight you bring to AFR and to countdown to kickoff, and I appreciate you hopping on.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I get in trouble sometimes. They actually. How Dave was saying how when I fill in sometimes on the Wise Guys, and I freestyle a lot. Like I get the rundown, I'll do notes, and don't get me wrong, I study, but I don't really have a filter. With my mouth, it's hard because I'm so direct, and the first thing that comes to my mind, boom. And so Dave's always like, man, we've been thinking about delaying your mic 15 seconds because we're live TV. So, yeah, if I say anything here, I guess you guys can edit that out.
Yeah, this is pre-recorded. We can edit out. I've actually edited out a lot of my own stuff just because I sound like a moron. So yeah, we'll edit out whatever we want if we don't like what you say. But again, happy to have you on, and I think this is great timing, and really this is probably the biggest reason. By the way, I want you on as often as we can get you on.
Yeah, for sure.
But the timing of this specific episode, I think, is perfect because you were just on a what they call them, X Spaces, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But I thought you had some great insight, and they just wouldn't let you share it. And we're going to talk about that. So for those that are tuning in, we will talk about that. But I wanted to start off with the news of last week with BYU football because. Potentially, I think this was one of the biggest weeks in terms of recruiting this offseason. They got Tanavasa, they got Carson Ryan, they've gotten guys, but to bring in 3 pretty top caliber transfers in both Bachmeier brothers and Justin Kirkland.
Is that Bear and Tiger?
Bear and Tiger Bachmeier.
Are those their real names?
They are, yeah.
Their parents.
They go from Hank. Right, Boise State's quarterback. BYU played him, I think, twice or maybe 3 times. Go from Hank to Bear and Tiger.
Hey, shout out to their parents, legendary for that.
And we're not gonna make the joke that everyone seems to be making because there's another recruit that BYU is going for that fits within that.
Really.
Bear and Tiger theme. Last name Lyons, right? Lyons.
That's hilarious.
We're not gonna make that joke,
That's
even though we kind of just did. Everyone else seems to be, but. Yeah, but let's talk about Bear and Tiger because I think the biggest question marks going into this next season were, quarterback and defensive tackle, and Justin Kirkland's going to be part of that. But, there was the kid from Skyridge, McKay Hillstead. He was undersized, so he's a baller, right? I've seen him at Skyridge. He's a great athlete, but he's undersized, and so. BYU, I think, still needed some depth and some more potential at the backup quarterback spot. And I think Bear fits that role. Now he's probably not going to start, right? I think Jake's still going to start this year. But Bear provides kind of this long-term depth that they seem to need.
Well, and when you think about a backup quarterback, like traditionally, right, and on paper in the football sense, the backup is supposed to be there, somebody that can maintain playing for a small amount of time while your starter gets back healthy, right? And so he has to know what he's doing. He has to know the plays. He doesn't have to go out and win the game. Just don't go lose the game, right? And so when you have a guy that comes in with experience at this level, that's something. And also, like you said, setting it up for where he can be a solid backup, and then that can catapult him into the next year when Jake is gone.
Yeah, and if BYU does go out and get a Ryder Lyons, he kind of bridges that gap between Jake Retzlaff and Ryder, because Ryder's going on a mission. He's not going to be available for, some people think a year. There's this kind of debate of whether or not he's actually going out for a year or 2 years.
You could choose.
That's the thing, right? There was an implication that like he was saying that he was only going to go out for a year. And I'd never heard of that. I think it was an Ole Miss guy that originally said it on one of their podcasts. It might have been Locked On Ole Miss or whatever podcast. They had said like, yeah, he's only going to go out for a year. And I'm like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. That's not a thing. You can't do that.
Yeah, I never heard that before.
But then there was, I think there was of all people, a Utah fan blogger or beat writer or something that was implying that Ryder was telling people he was going out for a year.
For a year.
Anyway, whether it's a year or not, there's still going to be a bit of a bridge between Jake Retzlaff and Ryder if Ryder comes to BYU. So I think Bear fits that role. So he's a quarterback. For those that don't know, he's a transfer out of Stanford from Murrieta, California. He's a 4-star high school recruit. 6,800 passing yards, 59 touchdowns in high school, in addition to 1,700 rushing yards and 33 touchdowns in high school. Do you know his offer list? Who he had offered out of high school? Alabama, Stanford, obviously, Colorado, Miami, Texas A&M, Oregon, Michigan, among many others. But those
how many years does he have left?
I think he's I want to say he's a sophomore. He will be a sophomore this year.
So he's
got a couple more years after this.
Okay.
So he'll bridge that gap very nicely.
Yeah.
And again, McKay could challenge him, right? Like I think him and McKay Hillstead will kind of battle for that top spot next year. But Bear, outside of McKay, it was kind of nobody, right? And so Bear is a much needed guy to at least push McKay Hillstead, if not beat him out.
Well, and I know there's a couple games last year where maybe if you had a backup, I'm just saying, if you had a backup, okay, let's say this: if you're at 80% as a quarterback, your quarterback's at 80% your starter, and that 80% isn't, let's say, going to put you guys in a position to win games, you probably would want to, find a game, in the schedule, and say, you know what, like we can win this game without our starter. Let's put our backup in, because maybe like these next couple of weeks we have tougher opponents. I know that there is times like that this year where Jake was playing like hurt, and when people look back after the Utah game, I mean, he was busted, and everybody was just like fans, right? Like we were like, you're an outside person looking in. You're like, he sucks now. Like what happened? He sucks.
Yeah. And
there's certain injuries, especially with certain positions, most positions except for the quarterback position, you can get away with having nagging injuries, right?
Sure.
You get shot up and you take all these type of drugs. I'm talking about medical drugs, not real drugs, right? But quarterback, there's certain mechanics, right, that you have to have, and if you're not full strength in those areas of your body, like the ball, you're just not going to be as productive. And so I think it was pretty telling that because he fought through it and wasn't able to play up to the best of his ability, that kind of I started questioning the quarterback room a little bit, like the depth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, you wonder if Gary Bohannon is the guy that everyone made him out to be. And I think Gary was dealing with injuries himself too.
He was because there were packages. I can say this now. Season's over.
Yeah,
I was like, I probably should say this. It's over. I can say this.
Spill it.
There was packages specifically for him.
Yeah.
Where it was going to be like a wildcat, right? And
Well, they ran some of them against Colorado.
a little, yep. And I think that was that's his last game, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was he had some injuries like with his back to where he was like, only put me in as the backup if you need me, if you absolutely need me. So that was. To me, I'm thinking if I'm in that situation, if I'm A-Rod, I'm like, oh, you basically telling me I can't use you. Yeah,
especially in these packages that I need you to run in, right?
That's what I mean. Yeah. So then you start looking at the depth behind Gary, and now you start to question, like, okay, do we have depth? So that is a question that us as fans and analysts have for sure.
Yeah. So in addition, and this is kind of an additional benefit to bringing in Bear, as you bring in now his brother. And his brother's name is Tiger. So you have Bear and Tiger. Tiger, by the way, graduated from Stanford in 2.5 years with a degree in computer science.
Yeah, I heard
so
that's
he
crazy.
is smart, which, in football, I think translates to football IQ. He was their kick return and punt return specialist. And so, I think receiver BYU is pretty well set.
Yeah.
You can always bring in depth. You'll always welcome depth. But when you lose Keelan Marion, you kind of lost. Granted, you still have Parker Kingston that can return punts for you, and he probably still will. But you lost a really good kick returner, and BYU's struggled. Retaining and bringing in, and maybe it's more just like selecting and developing kick returners. But Keelan Marion was probably the best kick returner since O'Neal Chambers, since Cody Hoffman was pretty good. They've had some decent.
I play with O'Neal, yeah.
Pretty good returners, right? But like Keelan was solid. Like we saw, how well he returned kicks, and it won us games, right? It won us games last year. And so bringing in a guy like Tiger Bachmeier, who had 6 career kick returns for a touchdown at Stanford, it fills at least that role nicely.
And what year is he?
He is. Well, he had 2.5 years. I think he's a junior or senior.
Okay.
This year.
So okay. That's pretty.
He's the older brother.
That's pretty legit. Six in his career at Stanford.
Yep.
Oh yeah. That's actually really good. Usually people will leave. Like what did Keelan have? He had 4 or 3 total.
Yeah, he had a few last year. At least 2 or 3.
I think that's all he had though.
Yeah.
That's his career, right? So
but still,
you put perspective into 6 versus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to say it's an upgrade because we don't really know how it's going to shake out, but just off of the stats alone, it seems like it could be. And based off of competition as well, like I think when Keelan had his first last year was against Wyoming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it helped separate the lead, but I don't think we would have lost a Wyoming team, And so you just look at Stanford and the opponents that they played or on their schedule. I would like to see where those returns, because I say this to everybody all the time. Playing against Wyoming, Colorado State, I was All-American. I had interception after interceptions, huge hits and tackles, but against Utah, against TCU, you know what I mean? So stats can also look better than what they appear on paper.
Sure. And to be fair, so Tiger's first punt return for a touchdown, it was actually his first collegiate game as a punt returner. He had a punt return for a touchdown, 90 yards against Cal Poly.
Oh, nice. See, there you go.
So yeah,
there you go. But still, though, I mean, you still have to have some type of a skill set when it comes to returning, because returning, like most people think that it's about speed, and it is about speed, but it's also understanding angles and people's momentum and how that impacts like the way that you set things up, right? And it's almost like you're using their speed and their angle and like the angle that they're chasing you against them. And so when you look at the really, really good punt returners, they'll catch the ball, set it up a little bit, kind of scan, set it up, boom, make one move. Somebody else comes, makes another one, and then usually he's gone. Yeah. Right? It's like 1 or 2 steps and bam.
Yep.
So even though it could be against lesser opponents, you still have to have that skill set. That's very that's extremely rare to have. Like your average football player doesn't understand that concept. I just said.
It's a vision thing,
Yeah,
for sure. It's a one cut, and you're down a lane, and you're heading for the end zone. There's usually not more than one cut gets you to the end zone. Okay, and then the third biggest, the third big recruit this week was Justin Kirkland, and this is kind of where we get into this tampering issue, and I think this will kind of segue into your Spaces conversation with some Big 12 fans. Mm-hmm. But Justin Kirkland's a big addition to provide depth to a defensive line that didn't have any. Those were the two biggest positions they needed people for, bodies for, quarterback, depth-wise at least, quarterback and defensive tackle. Because you have Tanavasa. I think Keanu Tanavasa is going to be your undisputed starter at defensive tackle, but he's injury-prone, as we've seen at Utah. Justin Kirkland had 40 tackles, 22 solo, and 1 sack at Oklahoma State. He also played at Utah Tech. I didn't know that. He's from Roy, so it makes sense. Nice. He did play at Utah Tech before Oklahoma State. He was a 3-star defensive tackle as a transfer, so some added depth. But here's where I think this is where you come in, right? This is where I think the big controversy lies. And we talked about tampering last week on the show. Because Utah beat writers were alleging that BYU was tampering with some of their players, 3 of their guys, including Smith Snowden. And what's wild is that has now spread, that perception has now spread to the rest of the Big 12. I think Baylor fans are complaining about it. And granted, it could be just a small minority of those fans, but they're vocal. And now Oklahoma State fans are complaining about it because of Justin Kirkland. And so that's where this Spaces comes in. And just to kind of paint the picture, Poke Nation, who's a pretty well-known influencer, sports influencer among Big 12, among Oklahoma State fans, but also just Big 12 fans in general. He's actually his Twitter handle is @Big12Pokes. Started a space on X, and for those that don't know what a space is, it's basically just a chat room. That's a public chat room that anybody can join, anybody can listen to, and anybody can become a speaker if the host allows them to become a speaker. So how did you find it, and how did you end up joining this?
So I saw a post that he made, because I follow him now, which is funny.
Nice. Hey, honestly, he's a decent follow. We talked about this off air, but I have followed him for a while, and he's a funny guy. First of all, I think people take him too seriously, and he's even said don't take me seriously. Like I'm a burner account. Like he's a troll, right? Like he knows he's a troll. Like it's like our Boney Fuller, right? We have Boney Fuller. Yeah. Nobody should ever take Boney Fuller seriously. Same with this guy.
No, but I honestly, it's funny because, and we'll get into this. There was some I don't know if he's a fan or if he has a podcast, but he the next day said, basically, made this post, former player, current, and I was like, that's not what I said at all. You would think that there would be some type of animosity, I would try to, I would be pissed off or mad. I'm actually meeting up with him on Friday because his family are huge BYU fans. Nice. I'm gonna sign, you know what I'm saying? So nice. That's the type I feel like when it comes to sports, right? We should be able to separate personal. You know what I mean? I'm gonna talk as much. Oh, I almost cussed. I'm gonna talk as much crap as possible to you when I play you. I'm trying to kill you. When your team isn't playing, I don't want you guys to win. When you guys play, I don't want you guys to win at all. Mm-hmm. Do people say this, I say this all the time. I don't, at my work, if there's blue Gatorade, green, I'm not grabbing red. They're asking all the time, what do you want? Anything but red. Or, with my kids, I'm like, no, you can't eat the red ones. I'm dead serious, right? But, I still understand that, that's still a person, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think a lot of, personally, as I'm starting to see this unfold now, because this is the most I've ever engaged and interacted with Utah fans, has been these last couple years. Mm-hmm. And they're crazy, dude. They're exact opposite of what I just said, not being able to separate. And I personally think a lot of it has to do with that they're people that left the church, and usually when somebody leaves the church, they're they tend to be bitter for a
Sure.
while, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that they leave the church, and then they associate the school and sports with the church, which, granted, obviously it's the church's school, but I think that bitterness, and this is my opinion, right? Somebody outside looking in, I think that's where people that are like the toxic comes from.
Yeah.
And more of the personal shots.
Yeah.
That come from.
And I would even expand that to not necessarily people who were members and have left the church, but those that just have animosity towards the church in general. They don't have to have been a member at some point. People just have animosity.
Which is
sometimes.
the spaces. That's everybody who was, like,
yeah.
You're right, because this is the thing. So to answer you directly, I saw a post that said this space is going to be good. He like made a post like promoting it, but he also was like talking about the tampering. So I was like, and because of what you said, like he has a lot of the Big 12 fan base, and you know how algorithms work. So I believe that's how I came across it. And so I went on again, not for that specifically, just for whatever. And I saw it. I was like, oh, this is what the dude was talking about. I'm going to click on it. So I clicked on it and I listened. And I listened for about an hour. And it was interesting, the stuff that they were saying. And then they were just talking about like the church and having all this money. And I'm over here laughing because I'm like, sucks for you guys. Yeah, we got money, right? And Then there's a Colorado, I don't want to call him an analyst, but he's kind of like the post guy, right?
Yeah.
But for Colorado. But also he also has a Big 12 like following as well. He gets on, he's a black dude. I hope so. I hope I'm right. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Black dude, and he starts talking about like how BYU on the basketball side and on the football side, they're tampering, and the church is, dropping all this money, and he was like, it's got to be tampering because and all the money because there's no black dude that's gonna want to go to Provo. And I'm like, oh no. Let me get on here. Let me get on here. You don't know what you're talking about.
Oh no.
And so I think I got kicked out like 2-3 times, but I kept like coming back in, which is weird. And my initial point that that account tweeted out over me. Or about me from the recording of the spaces, talked about like there's an honor code, but the honor code is the honor code on paper. And then I tried to say something else. I think I got cut off by that point or kicked out. And so people are trying to imply that I said that the honor code doesn't apply to athletes.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to set up was that if somebody came to you and said, I'll give you $5 million for 2 years if you don't have sex or drink, what are you gonna do? I'm not gonna have sex. I'm not gonna drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
For $5 million. And so that was the point I was trying to set up. Well, that was my overall point I was trying to set up. Like, dude, you people do anything for money. Like, that's not a good argument that because there's an honor code and there's a boatload of money, where's your connection of tampering? Like that, like you don't even know what you're talking about. Like you sound stupid. And I also was saying that you can find drugs and alcohol anywhere. You can find sex anywhere. You can go to the #1 safest city in America and you will find crime, right? If you want to find it. And so I don't think that that's going to be stopped. Like that wouldn't, if I know that I'm going to find that, and my mindset is going to be, okay, I'll just make sure I won't get caught.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think that that's going to sit and stop somebody from wanting to come, or like I said, $5 million, right, or $2 million, or whatever the case is. But like, just because there's an honor code, and you fit, and a player is transferring to a school with that honor code, I don't see how that's.
Yeah.
I don't see the connect. You know what I'm saying? I don't see the connection.
This episode is brought to you by Aptiv. Aptiv believes that every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptiv will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptiv is why. Visit AptivPestControl.com/Loyal Cougars or call 844-966-4787 and mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's AptivPestControl.com/Loyal Cougars or call 844-966-4787. Terms and conditions apply. Get home field advantage with Aptiv. Looking to get your brand in front of BYU's most engaged fans? The Loyal Cougars podcast and Cougar Board are your perfect match. Cougar Board is the largest online community of BYU fans with thousands of posts every day. The Loyal Cougars podcast is the official podcast of Cougar Board, and we have sponsorship opportunities available for both the podcast and the site. Contact us at sponsorships@loyalcougars.com, and we'll help your message hit home with the Cougar faithful. Again, that's sponsorships@loyalcougars.com. I get what you're saying. The honor code should not be a deterrent, and the fact that people go to BYU despite an honor code should not be evidence of tampering.
Yes,
because it's money, right? It's the opportunity to play in the NFL, and like you said, I can go to Miami or I can go to BYU. Sure, the experience is going to be different. I think the availability of those things that you mentioned is going to be different, right? But you're exactly right. Like, you're going to be able to find, like, there have been BYU athletes that were caught in the past, right? Yeah. Like, you're going to be able to find whatever you want, especially as a BYU, as an athlete, right? Like, I feel like you have access to more of that stuff. Maybe I'm being naive by thinking that, but.
No, you're right. And my first point that I was trying to make when I first got on was, I said, hey, most of us are guys in here. Shout out to the girls that are, and they could maybe attest to this too. We all know and been that guy or been on the other side where you are battling for a girl's heart and maybe that person has more money than you. Who do you think she's going to choose? Right? Mm-hmm. If it's me, if I'm the girl, I'm choosing the guy with the most money. So I said, put this into perspective when it comes to these kids and these options that they have. Why would I stay at a school that's paying me $600,000 when this school is going to offer me $5 million? It does not. It doesn't make sense, especially if I'm not if I'm not in a position to where I'm like a Travis Hunter, where I know I'm going first round next year, or top 5 next year. Of course, I'm staying. I'll stay at Colorado. Stay at Colorado. You know what I'm saying? But. Anybody with those options, just human beings, are going to do that. Now, number 2, I said was, these kids have agents. This is where the rule is. I said, so what? Let's define what tampering is. Mm-hmm. Let's define that. That is a coach directly reaching out and contacting a player when he's not in the portal, right? Or during or outside of recruiting timelines.
Yeah, and I think it extends to like official representatives of a team. But where is that defined? Like, is that assistant coaches? Does that stop at like
the water boy?
Athletic department? Yeah.
What you mean?
Other teammates, like your friend, like, you know.
The English teacher that's teaching stats, or you know what I'm saying? Yeah, like the stats teacher, like what does that mean?
And Justin Kirkland's a good example of that because, and it was actually mentioned it was like Locked On Big 12 podcast. Locked On Oklahoma State, whatever, Cowboys podcast. And he was saying, like, look, Justin Kirkland's from Roy, Utah. He's got friends on both teams that are both reaching out to him. And he literally said, like, that's what's happening is
it's the teammates.
Either teams or representatives or maybe loose representatives of these teams are both reaching out to them, this one player, because they have these like already established connections. And it just so happened that BYU won out. And so then, you know, Utah fans go out and they claim tampering because they lost this kind of bidding war or whatever. And so
actually, I gotta change the points around, right? Because the first point is that there's third parties that are involved. I told him, I said, do you think these coaches, especially at these big schools, you got D coordinators making $1.5, $2, $3 million nowadays? Do you think as a defensive coordinator making $3 million a year that I'm going to risk my job and reach out to a kid directly? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. But will I have somebody else do it? Yeah, I could have somebody else do it, right? Yeah. because that definition of tampering, and I try to get them to understand, like, let's use the court of law, right? It's not what you know, it's what you can prove, right? How can you prove this based off the laws that are defined? And I said, unfortunately, for schools like you guys that are broke, I'm sorry, that sounded rude. Unfortunately,
call poverty programs.
Unfortunately, for schools like you that don't have a lot of resources, you're going to lose on those bidding wars. And fortunately for BYU and schools like BYU, we have additional resources. And then what I tried to explain to them as well was this. I said, you guys think that the church is giving money. Like, they're not. There's a time where when BYU athletics or BYU Hawaii and their athletics programs was removed, they were thinking about like removing BYU athletics. Well, I thought it was crazy, but I was like, it gave me perspective. Like, oh, they really do not care.
Yeah.
They really do not care at all. And what I think somebody that was in the spaces with us was trying to explain to them, like, our alumni do really well, and I was trying to give them perspective. Like, do you know, like, and not only just the alumni, but you have the church, right? You have members of the church, the owner of JetBlue, the owner of Marriott, LDS. Why would I not go and drop $10 million for the athletic program? That's not the church.
Yeah.
That is the benefit and the network that BYU has. And that was the point I was trying to make to them, was that because in their eyes, they're like, okay, first they're tampering, but then they can tamper and we'll lose those bidding wars because the church is coming in. And I'm like, man, if the day that BYU, the day that the church gives church money to BYU athletics, it's over for everybody. Everybody with championship after championship. It wouldn't even be fair. They would have to step in and make a rule. Yeah. I promise you, there would be a rule that would have to be made, because you have like the Nick Sabans of the world that get mad and pissed off. Not fair. There would be a rule that would have to be made that no church can't support or provide money or reason. You know what I'm saying? They'd have to do something, because we would get every kid, and that's not the case now. It's just that when you start to have success, and when you have the church, like I say this to everybody, I say every single member of the church, BYU is at bare minimum like number 2 favorite team. If you're from Oregon, maybe Oregon's number 1, BYU's number 2. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So imagine if BYU is your number 1 team, you went there, and you're the owner of the Jazz. You happen to be a billionaire. Like, what? Yeah. Come on now. Like, it's not that hard to grasp. I think that they are also trying to put us in a position where, because they know they can't compete, but they're talking out their butts, trying to make it look like there's like something sinister going on with the church. That's where my issue is.
Yeah, and ultimately it comes down to this kind of moral high ground. And I think it first started where, like, the accusations were, BYU's cheating. They're doing something that nobody else is doing. And it was like, okay, A, that's either not happening, or B, it's something that everyone's doing. And I think I think the general consensus now is that, like, everyone's tampering, right? We've seen evidence of tampering. Nick Saban has accused people of tampering. He's also admitted to tampering, right? Like, it's happening everywhere. And so I think that's the general consensus now. And so now the goalposts have been shifted to now, like, they're like they kind of concede, yeah, everyone's tampering, but BYU is held to a higher standard, and so BYU shouldn't tamper.
That part too, yeah. And
so it's like, okay, so if BYU is going to compete, at that point, why even have an athletics program, right? Because if BYU is going to compete in a P5 conference, or if P5 for basketball, P5 for football, major for basketball, if BYU is going to compete in those conferences, they have to do what everyone else is doing. And whether that means, before tampering, whether that means they have a bag man, they have a bag man, as everyone else does. If that means they're tampering under the rug, they're hiring or they're bringing in like these kind of third parties to reach out to players, or they're bringing in like family or friends to reach out to these players, or whatever everyone else is doing, they're going to do it too. And this whole idea that like BYU needs to be held to a higher standard because they're owned by the church. Like, it's a very holier than thou approach, and nobody cares more than Utah fans.
That's the weird part, and it's starting to bleed over to other fan bases, but I think it's the seed that has been planted by Utah from saying those things, because as soon as it starts happening to them, which it is now, right? They're like, I made the connection.
Yeah,
it is happening to us. Like that's BS.
They're grasping.
Yes, 100%. And like you talk about, fan bases not holding BYU to the standard. The standard is based off of the definition of the law. That is the standard. and we all follow it. That's it. Until somebody gets caught. Again, these kids have agents. So they're proactively going out. And what fans don't understand either is when you look at these NIL like ratings and stuff like that, there's NIL ratings. There's star performance ratings, right? What you do on the field, but then how much your NIL ratings are. So as your value increases, what do you think these kids are thinking to themselves? Or when they have dad, mom, agent, whatever the case is, oh no, son, like back in the day, right? When boosters would come and pay kids, they wouldn't hand them a bag directly. They hand it to their mother.
Yeah.
And the mother, you know what I'm saying? Like there is no like that stuff happens, to your point. It happens. But as far as a direct breaking the law, I don't think that's happened.
No.
I don't think any school is doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think that they are saying, "Hey, give it to my mom." So by definition, if it's like that's, to me, like I said, by definition, that's not tampering.
Yeah, and to all kind of circle back to the original, reason why you joined this conversation, if there are individuals that do break the law, or if there are individuals that break the honor code, for that matter, and it's egregious enough and I think BYU's done actually a really good job of starting to handle these things internally. I think, you had Harvey Younga around your time, Brandon Davies around your time. Those were very public, and like, obviously
when I see Harvey's son, Jackson, I still tell him all the time. I say, you're the reason why my senior year was horrible. Because he got kicked out going into the senior year. And every time he's like, what?
What's wild, they actually had a good year. I mean, that was
the Jake Heaps year.
Oh, 2010 was? Okay.
Yeah,
so that's when he got. Okay.
That's when he.
I was thinking 2009. So 2010.
No, 2009 we beat Oklahoma.
Yeah,
we finished 11-2. Yeah. 2010 we broke in a true freshman with no running back.
Yeah, it was like JJ Caress, Brian Correa. It was like a running back by
Josh Kozat.
Yeah, Juice.
And you make a good point though. As far as them handling it internally, like Bronco would always say, if something happens, come to me first because I can help you out. Versus the school or maybe whatever the case is, because he goes, I like that approach because sending a kid home, kicking him out of school is not making him better. He's gonna go back to the drugs or to sex or whatever lifestyle he was living. Why not keep him here, put him on some type of program where we can help to remove that behavior for the future.
Yeah. And it just, I think, even today, it's 15 years later, we're still talking about Brandon Davies.
Right.
And, I think even the biggest cynics are saying he's the reason why BYU didn't make it to the Final Four or whatever. Like that's just not fair on Brandon. Yeah. I get he made mistakes and he's got to pay for those mistakes, but he's a college kid. He's making a mistake, and they made it so public. Back then, honor code office kicked him out of school, and everyone jumps to these accusations, and that's how you get 15 years later us knowing Brandon Davies by what he did off the court. And I don't think that's fair. And I think since then, BYU's done a really good job, and critics will say, they're just sweeping things under the rug. Like that's all they're trying to do to save their own image. Mm-mm. I think it's more for the benefit of the athletes. These are college kids and, they're amateur athletes for the most part. And granted, NIL's kind of changing that a little bit, but like, we don't need to put these kids on public blast. Like, let's handle things internally for a mistake that they made that's not illegal, right? There's nothing illegal about what they've done. They've broken the honor code, let's say, or whatever. And granted, I'm sure that happens more than we know about, but I like that BYU is kind of handling it more internally. And to your point, again, it should never be a deterrent. I actually think for a lot of parents, they prefer to have an honor code. And most schools have an honor code. It's just not the same types of rules as what BYU has. But most schools have something.
Like TCU, Baylor, they have
sort
TCU
of code of conduct.
There's those schools, like those type of schools, the Christian schools, have a higher code than just like a code of conduct. It's a little bit higher. It's not as high as BYU's.
It's not like Utah's no DUIs, right?
Like, come on, like that's like duh. That's obvious. You know what I'm saying?
Don't do anything illegal.
Yeah, and again, my point was like when I said the honor code thing was like you don't know. I actually was trying to get my point to agree with them that like you think just because there's rules that they're not broken.
Yeah.
Like you can't be that naive. I'm telling you, I went to school here. You know what I'm saying? I lived it. I've seen it, right? So just because there's rules does not mean that they're being followed 100%. And I said, however, that does not mean I'm saying BYU does not enforce it.
Yeah.
It's two separate things, and but again, to your point, I appreciate it a lot. Like, I remember I got in trouble for wearing earrings. Like, I remember one of my teachers came and grabbed Tom Homo, grabbed Bronco. I'll always remember this. After we had a team meeting, it's like middle of the season, and I'm standing outside of the room, and everybody's going to the locker room, and I got a meeting. Oh, and then the bishop, not the bishop. Is it bishop? No, not the bishop. The guy that's over the non-members. So it's him.
I don't
Tom,
know.
I forget. There's a term for it, but like as a non-member, you have to go and like a chaplain, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was him, Tom, and Bronco, and they were like, "Really? We having this conversation about his earrings?" Like, and I remember like same thing with beards. Now I'm like, I see kids with dreads and they got like, hair dyed. It reminds me of back home being in the Bay Area. Everybody got beards. I'm like, okay, I appreciate the way that BYU is, the direction that they're going towards, which I believe is more humanizing the person.
It's more accepting, right?
Right. Well, and that's where the humanization comes in, which is like, understand these are human beings. They're not perfect. We want to hold everybody to the standard, but how we deal with it when they fall short is going to be on an individual basis, which is why I don't think you're hearing stuff like you did in the past.
Cool. Brian, as always, and I get this is the first time, but hopefully we can get you on down the road as well as often as possible. I love your insight. Again, I love your perspective of BYU because it's just different. Like it's different than what we can get from anyone else. And so I appreciate you hopping on and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, man. I'm just down the street, so let me know.
Okay.
He knows.
We've got our we'll call him our producer Steve behind the camera.
Producer Steve knows.
Pushing buttons. That's going to do it for us today. This is the Loyal Cougars podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds. This is Brian Logan. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, head over to our YouTube channel or subscribe to anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can listen or watch on a weekly basis. But for now, this is the Loyal Cougars podcast. We'll see you next week.